Production of Kansas City Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Coming up, it's a newsmaker edition of the program, with the mayor pulling the plug on a KCI election, the streetcar launching, and KCMO police announcing they're slashing more than 100 law enforcement jobs. We dissect the three issues with three members of the city council. Plus, what role should religion play in politics? With one more week left in the Missouri legislative session, business and civic groups still watching whether Missouri's Religious Freedom Amendment will return. We head out on location and dissect the issue with area faith and political leaders. Hello, I'm Nick Haynes. We've pushed aside our regular reporters this week to bring you the decision makers in a week where some big news is happening in the city. Joining us around the cozy confines of our Week in Review table, Kansas City Mayor Pro Tem Scott Wagner and City Council members Teresa Law and Quinton Lucas. Why did we gather you here today? Well, a number of Kansas Cityans are this week still scratching their heads after the mayor announces he's pulling the plug on plans to hold an election this year for a new $1 billion terminal at KCI Airport. Last week, the airline serving KCI came together in agreement to say they will consider no other option. They'll help finance it, and they will want it on the August ballot. Now, the mayor's response: a single terminal is inevitable. If you think something is inevitable, do it now. So what changed in the matter of a week, Teresa Law?
Well, actually, someone commissioned a poll, a very substantial poll that apparently the mayor was given, and those poll numbers were not very good. So it didn't show good support for the
not very good, and that was less than 40% of those polled said they would support a new KCI terminal.
That's correct. You probably couldn't overcome those numbers in the short time we had before the election in August.
Do you really think, Scott Wagner, that if it had been placed on the ballot in August, if it had been placed on the November ballot, it would have failed?
I think based on what the poll results showed, I think the likelihood was pretty strong. And I guess, really what it boils down to is, every election is an effort. And we all know that because we've gone through them ourselves. You want to at least believe you are within striking distance of being successful. And I think if you think you're not going to be, and you're going to ask whomever you're going to ask to be a part of such a campaign, only to lose, that's a pretty hard mountain to climb.
What happens, though, if there is a delay? Why would we think that the public attitude would in any way change if it was placed on the ballot next year? In that same poll, more than 80% of those responding said they liked the way the airport was now.
Well, I think there was a real public process concern and problem here. Although we've had years of hearings, there's been this idea that this was a top-down solution. And I think that's what the poll was saying, and I think that's what a lot of people said when we went out and talked to them every day. And so the effort that we need to work on now is really letting people know and feel like they're a part of the process, not just hearing answers along the way. And I think that could lead to a different result a year from now, 2 years from now.
Does it offer an opportunity for other options to be considered? Not only was there a different plan considered by locally based Crawford architects who thought that they could revamp the airport, remake the airport, the terminal there, for pennies on the dollar in contrast to what this $1 billion plan was. And also Dave Helling writing in the Star this week saying this may even launch an inquiry into whether an airport could be built someplace else, including in Johnson County.
Well, I think we do need to go back to the table and bring all of the interested parties and all of the stakeholders and begin the talks again. And I think we need to do that right away. I don't want to let a lot of grass grow. And I think we need to have renovations on the table, major renovations. That was never an option for this council. It was always the single terminal, and that's the only option that we were given.
I would say, however, to your point of would we look at another location? Would Kansas, for example, want a location? Part of the reason why, as many may recall, when the single terminal option was first put out there, it was supposed to be on the southern part of our airport lines. That changed because that would have required $500 million in additional roadways to be built, which, by the way, is the entire MoDOT budget, and they said, no, we're not going to build them. No one was going to build them. So if, as I understand, Kansas has taken about $185 million of their road budget, so I'm not sure how they would build the infrastructure necessary, let alone even talking about an airport. So I have a feeling it's going to stay right where it is.
Well, the mayor says not having to hold an election on KCI this year will allow the council to spend its time on other priorities, such as reducing the crime rate. Well, this week we learn from the Kansas City police chief that in order to balance his department's budget, he's eliminating 123 law enforcement positions. Now, how much of a priority is reducing the crime rate when the police chief is having to reduce the number of sworn officers on the street by 8%, Councilman Lucas?
I want to make sure we distinguish this from the airport. We distinguish this from streetcar. The airport was going to be a different source of funding. It isn't all just the same magical pot. And so it's not as if we were thinking of spending $1 billion that would have funded police and firefighters and all these other items. And instead, we're just going to build an airport that 40% of the people wanted. Instead, what we're dealing with now is how can we spend our general fund in Kansas City effectively to support things like public safety. Now, one other point on that is I am strongly in support of an enhanced investment in public safety and for our police officers. And I think most people on the council are. So our challenge over the next year and the next years is how we can make sure we meet the staffing needs of the Kansas City Police Department, but also how we can police effectively and efficiently, which is a real goal of ours.
Well, we have Lisa Miller, who lives on East 31st Street, the same street as we are right here at KCPT, and she's alarmed. I think they'll be overworked, less staffed. How safe will we be in the city with less officers patrolling the area? How do you respond to Lisa, then, Councilwoman Law?
Well, I respond to Lisa. She's exactly right. And I think it's the responsibility of this council to fix it. This council got here in August. This was our first budget. So we will be talking with the city manager moving forward, making sure that the amount of funds to make sure the police department, the fire department, those public safety pieces, the ambulance department, all get funded to where they need to be funded. And because in surveys, general surveys of the city, public safety is number one.
You know, we just recently passed an earnings tax, and as part of that campaign, it was said that, you know, if we don't pass the earnings tax, if you don't vote for it, we're going to be laying off police officers, we're going to be laying off firefighters. The earnings tax is overwhelmingly passed. And we're still laying off police officers. That doesn't seem to be right, does it?
Well, the reality is that we've laid off hundreds of people in city government since 2008. The reality is that, but for the earnings tax, you would be talking about a much different fire department, a much different police department, a much different city government in general. So I mean, all of that is true, and there is still that reliance on the earnings tax. The issue, though, when it comes to the PD, is that there is a different governance structure there than in any other police department in this country. And by that I mean, this year in this budget, we put in an additional $6 million. And you would think, well, if I'm giving you more, shouldn't that keep you where you're at? But once we write that check and it goes over to the police department, that is where we no longer have control. As you know, Nick, and I think as most people know, Kansas City is the only city in the country that does not run its own police department. That is done through state appointment.
Given the homicide rate we have in the city this year, don't you think the expectation of the public is, though, that we would see at least the same number of patrol officers, if not more, rather than seeing a reduction? And regardless of what you're saying about expenses,
right,
the public would demand that we would see more police officers, not less.
Sure. Well, there's certainly the ability for more police officers to deal with and take care of more calls for service. But the reality is that if we want to make the connection that more officers equals less homicides, that's a very dangerous comparison to make, because that would assume that if I had 100 more or 200 more or 300 more, there would be no more homicides in the city.
Councilman Lucas, you were on our crime special where we were rolling up our sleeves looking at this whole issue. I mean, are you alarmed by this, or do you concede the point with Councilman Wagner that, you know, there are other ways of reducing crime? It doesn't involve more police on the street.
Alarmed, no, because I'm getting used to things. Disappointed, yes. I think you're right to note. When voters went out and supported the earnings tax, no matter what we know or think or anything like that, they thought thought that there would be police officers to help investigate crime and fight crime. There'd be firefighters to help put fires out, that the city would continue to function in an effective, efficient way as it has for decades. And to the extent that the city doesn't look like that, that's a trust gap that we have to close in some way. That's something that we have to offer. And so we need to tell them, if we're not going to have more police officers, how is policing being done? How are people feeling safer here in Kansas City?
One of the big news items this week in Kansas City is the launch of a streetcar. Councilwoman Lohr, how often would you see yourself riding this streetcar?
Of course, City Hall is downtown, so my guess is if I'm going to lunch somewhere, I would probably hop on and go up and down Main and find different lunch places. So that would be
Do you
mine.
see yourself riding it on a regular basis, Councilman Lucas?
You know, I see myself riding it on a regular basis, but I have one significant concern, which is I sit on the Planning, Zoning, and Economic Development Committee, and we talk about incentives all the time, and certainly we've seen a lot of development there, but we're still incenting projects near the streetcar line that relate to parking, garages, that relate to parking different issues, variances, other types of issues. And so what I really think we need to do is make sure that all of our city policy is supporting this successful approach to public transit, not just something that we're riding on one-off occasions.
Now, I know, Councilman Wagner, you've already sold your vehicle, so you can use this as your main source of transportation, so I don't even need to ask you this question. But how do we know if the streetcar is a success? If a month from now these streetcars are running half full, will we say that's a failure?
I think it's difficult to say whether or not the number of people inside a streetcar tells you whether or not they're a success or failure. I think really where you know it's a success or failure is kind of the premise of why we decided to go after it in the first place, which was building density and bringing more people into downtown. I would take a half-full streetcar and another 10 projects of development downtown and bringing another 1,000 people to live downtown, and I would call it a success.
Some people have observed that this would be a failure if it only ends up being this 2-mile starter line. It has to be part of a broader system in the city. Are there active conversations going on right now, Councilman Lucas, at City Hall to expand the system?
You know, I assume there are. I'm not a part of them.
Okay, Councilwoman Lohr, are you in these behind-the-scenes meetings where the blinds are brought down so this conversation can occur on expanding the streetcar line?
I'm in no meetings at all.
Well, I guess process of elimination.
It's you then, Councilman
all you.
Wagner.
It's all on me. No, what I would say is that there has always been an interest, I think, after the failure of the vote in August of 2014 to expand the lines. I think what you're finding, and what I'm certainly aware of, is there is a vocal group out there who are trying themselves to see how they can make that happen. But the bottom line, I think, is in every city, you start with a starter line, and as it gets successful, others want to find out ways to expand it, and Kansas City will be no different.
You'll be listening to just under 25% of the vote on the Kansas City, Missouri City Council. Council members Teresa Lohr and Quinton Lucas, and Mayor Pro Tem Scott Wagner. Coming up next, we head out of the building to examine what seems to be the increasing role of religion in politics. With one more week left in the Missouri legislative session, business and civic groups still watching whether Missouri's Religious Freedom Amendment will return. We take you now to the Church of the Resurrection, where we've joined with the American Public Square and KCPT's Beyond Belief Faith series to bring together area religious and political leaders to dissect what has been the most controversial bill of the entire Missouri legislative session. Along with American Public Square founder Alan Katz, his Church of the Resurrection senior pastor Adam Hamilton, Wallace Hartsfield II, who leads Metropolitan Missionary Baptist Church, Jim West, lead pastor of Colonial Presbyterian Church, Jennifer Butler, who flew in from Washington, she heads the White House Council on Faith-Based Partnerships, and State Senator Steve Fitzgerald, a conservative Republican from Kansas, who has promoted a number of bills that some say blur the line between religion and politics. On the audience's mind, a repeated question: to serve or not to serve?
How does the way I, as a transgender Christian, prevent someone else from a sincerely held belief just by serving me in public accommodation?
At what point does the government tell you that your religion must bend? I believe you have your own business. You can make your own rules: no hat, no shirt, no service, no shoes, no service. On the other hand, We have it pretty widely, if you're in interstate commerce or if you're largely a public accommodation, you need to accommodate all. But when it is interpreted, and reasonably so, that the demand is that the state is enforcing that you will participate in a celebration of something that you find to be not only unchristian, but in fact described as quite a bit less than that, and in fact you see as being a mock of marriage. But you will be forced to participate in that celebration, or you will pay with everything you have, potentially. And whose rights are going to have priority? Somebody who wants a photographer to, in fact, come and do all of this, put all of his or her artistic capability at the disposal of the groom and groom or the bride and bride? Where do we stop?
One of the things you said is, how far will you go? And I guess that would be the question I'd ask. So your drive up to my gas station with the Just Married on the, on your windows. I don't want to celebrate or even help you get to the reception, so I'm not going to let you buy gas, or I certainly don't want you spending your first married night in my hotel or having your dinner in my restaurant. It seems like the how far you can go question is really a problematic one. And so when it comes to whether Jim will or will not officiate at a same-gender marriage, I would say that's a religious question, and he absolutely has the right to be able to say, this is not in keeping with our understanding of Scripture, and in our church and in our and in my ministry, I am not going to do that, and I think that right needs to be protected. When it comes to somebody taking pictures or providing a wedding dress or baking a cake, these seem like basic services to me, and it seems very difficult to see where do you stop or where do you draw the line. You're not asking somebody who's baking a cake to celebrate their wedding, and half the weddings that we do are for people who are already living together. So we would say they're already living in a state that doesn't reflect the Christian ideal. But I don't hear any cake bakers saying, we're not going to bake a cake for you or sell you a wedding ring or DJ at your reception or whatever it might be. So I find it more challenging to think about where would the situation be in which you're actually celebrating versus providing a good and service.
Your point is that you'd find it very difficult as to where to draw the line. But at some point you have to draw the line. And if it's you and your wife are providing wedding services and doing dresses, and you don't want to provide a dress for the groom and groom, should you be forced to do that?
Well, again, I would say yes. I would say that this is a basic, you're providing a good and service to another human being, and that would look to me much more like civil rights issues. And I think the same argument might have been made in the 1950s about why I wouldn't serve African American people or whatever, even though the issue is a different issue. I think now when it comes to a religious person officiating at a ceremony, I think that's a different issue altogether.
So the faith does not imbue your entire life?
It does. My faith imbues every part of my life.
Well, but mine shouldn't.
No, I'm actually not saying it shouldn't. I'm just saying that you're providing a good or service. So where do you draw the line on that? I'm not going to teach you because you're a gay kid, because I don't believe in homosexuality. I think it's a sin, so I need you to say you're...
And now you're trying to draw the line. Now, what happens if you have a couple of people, let's get off the gay thing for a little bit. What happens if you have a couple of people who are Satanists and they want you to participate in their Satanistic ritual? And there are those. And you would say, well, you can't discriminate against a Satanist.
I would say that if I'm a cake baker, I'm baking cakes for people.
You make a cake that would say, Hail Satan?
I probably would not put that on the cake. You're right. There would be a limit. You're exactly right. I would have a certain point where I'd say I'm not. Yeah.
It's a difficult line to draw, but I think it needs to be drawn.
Well, and I think the question is, should the state prosecute people who make decisions based upon their religious conviction? That really is a question. And what we know is, right now, the state will hold people accountable to say, I ain't going to serve no nigger, right? Because that just is wrong. It's wrong to have a racial slur, to be prejudiced, and to judge a person based upon the color of their skin. That has been established not only as law, but as common sense and natural law. But now in this situation, there's this particular question is so divisive because the sacred text of Christianity defines marriage between a man and a woman. But let me just say this as a very conservative Christian pastor. The Christian should take every opportunity to show love and kindness and engage in conversation with people they disagree with, in particular people they think are in sin. We at Colonial would say to the cake baker, make sure that they know that as you make this cake or as you take their pictures, that you don't agree necessarily with their definition of marriage, or that according to your religious convictions, that this particular behavior is defined as sin, but that you love them and that you will serve them to the best of your ability, but define yourself and engage in the conversation. That's probably a healthier way to go.
Terry, thank you for your question and the courage it took to ask it. I believe as a Christian that every person is created in the image of God. And just to be clear, no one is asking pastors to perform gay weddings if that's not something they believe in. And I would defend any pastor's right to stand by that. At the same time, when we do enter into the public square, whether it's providing housing, whether it's providing some sort of commercial service, we have to respect every person. And as Christians, that's a deeply theological belief. It's also a democratic belief.
Love the sinner, particularly the sinner. However, you must also hate the sin, and you cannot be forced to be complicit in what you see as sin. And that is where the point is. The rest of it is beside the point.
Reverend Hartsfield. Yeah, there's a whole lot about this conversation that strangely sounds like discrimination that, just took place with blacks and continues to. And I think it's hard for some persons, and I don't think it is, I know it's hard for some persons who've always had a voice at the table to even begin to understand what it means to be muted at the table. You said that the whole ideal of where blacks, the whole issue of blacks and serving blacks was not a moral issue. I'm not sure you know that some of the things that were written theologically had to do with blacks were doubly damned. They were doubly damned because not only was their skin black, their souls were black. And the same thing is happening now with the LGBT community here. First, I would say they're not being acknowledged at the table as being fully human. Because every time they're talked about as sinners who stand in the need of being loved, as opposed to being creations of God. Those are two different ways of coming at it, but it says something radically different when I come at it by saying that here is a person who has been created by God. Now, I'm in agreement with Pastor Hamilton that I think individual faith groups, their arm cannot be twisted to force them to perform various services within the religious piece, because that would be an overreach by government. But when you talk about basic services, access to housing, access to jobs, just access and opportunity within the public square, we've got a real problem. I'm wondering what's so hard to acknowledge the people at the table. Everybody was saying it's hard to draw the line up here. Well, to me, that line at least has to be drawn long enough to include the people that politicians represent. And whether you agree with lifestyles of persons that you represent them.
Everybody on the stage here, except for you and I, have exempted themselves from having to do that because clergy should not in any way. But yet others who hold those beliefs and hold their actions to be important, well, we kind of cut them loose. And I think that is kind of an inconsistency that needs to be thought about a little bit more.
That was not what I was saying. I was saying that I agreed with Reverend Hamilton that traditions or faith traditions could not be forced to necessarily do that. That was not to say what I would not do. All right, because I'm very much for embracing the community.
I understand, but the thing is that, Pastor, what you're saying is that the clergy must be exempt, but everybody else, well, that's kind of, they're on their own. I appreciate the conversation. I very much appreciate the different points of view, and I certainly agree that more such conversation is absolutely needed because we are a country of the people. We are the people who run this country. You don't believe it? Come back in November. We're the rulers, and if we're not taking that seriously enough to become informed and to open an aperture wide enough to take in various different points of view, then we're very frankly negligent in our duties.
KCPT at Church of the Resurrection in Leawood, taking a deeper dive into one of the most divisive, contentious issues of the year in our metro. While the Missouri House Committee last week stalled the Religious Freedom Amendment, there is still another week left of the session, and backers are still vowing to revive the issue. We'll continue watching. Meanwhile, Kansas lawmakers this week wrap up their work for the year. Next week on the program, we'll dissect their work as our reporters return. I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here at KCPT, thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.